The poem This Winter Coming by Corin Press, and I'm going to try my best to go through it as quickly as possible to make this video as short as possible while trying not to leave anything out. Okay, so the poem is an extended metaphor for the current and coming violence in South Africa. We know it's written in 1986. We know that South Africa only gained its democracy in 1994, so this was a time period where further restrictions had been put in place. Apartheid had been going on for decades. Things were getting really heated. There was a lot of violence, there was a lot of anger, there was protesting. And so if we look at the title, This Winter Coming, the speaker is identifying with the fact that she can see what is happening in the country and she knows it's going to end badly. All right? The protesting against apartheid is growing more and more, and the violence is inevitable. Okay, so winter here, it's not an actual winter like summer winter, although winter often has negative connotations of trees losing their leaves and ground being bare, and in some countries snow, and it's cold and it's raining and it's unpleasant and it's oppressive. Okay, so there is that idea here, but the winter here is referring to a change, a transition, social change. Okay, and it's coming. It's a present participle. Coming means it's happening. It's not going to stop. It cannot be prevented. All right, whether you like it or not. And it's this winter because it's going to happen soon. It's not next winter. All right, it's specifically this winter. What that's around the corner now, and it's, in other words, we're in it. All right, it's started already. We're in this winter. Okay. Right, let's look at the first line. Walking in the thick rain of this winter we have only just entered, who is not frightened. Okay, so it doesn't matter who's walking, it's irrelevant who's walking. We are all, as citizens of the country, we're walking in this thick rain. Okay, and you can imagine, yes, there's this sort of literal sense of winter with it being cold and raining and a rough sea and all that, but it's not. It's an extended metaphor. Okay, so the rain that we're walking in is unpleasant. It's relentless. It's described as thick, like a blanket, because it's oppressive. All right, the conditions in which we find ourselves of this winter, this specific winter, which means that it's we're walking in the rain. I mean, we're already in the winter. We have only just entered it, though. Okay, so you can imagine like entering a storm, like that it's going to end badly. You're battering down the hatches. It's coming, whether you like it or not. Okay, so it's only just started. Things are going to get worse, and that creates an ominous tone. Okay, who is not frightened is a rhetorical question. Okay, yes, it's a question, but it doesn't need an answer, because the answer is obviously everybody is frightened, and that's not a specific race or a specific type of people. Everybody in the country is terrified of how things are going to end up, what is going to happen. This has been bubbling over for years and years, and this oppressive state has to come to an end. It just can't keep going like this. And everybody should be afraid. They have every right to be afraid. The sea is swollen, churning in broken waves, violent continual motion around the rocks. The sand is sinking away. Right. Okay, so we get this idea of that if it is a storm, if it is winter, then this is what the sea would be like. All right. So we've got repetition of the S sound there, and then I've underlined there in purple those words describing the sea and the waves and crashing against the rocks and the sand and all that. That diction suggests hostility and destruction, right? And the sand is being eroded away. Okay, so it's a destructive ocean. It's not a serene ocean. It emphasizes how dangerous it is. Sinking of the sand is symbolic of a world which is disappearing, in which one's sense of security and stability is being eroded. Therefore, there is every reason to be afraid. The seagulls will not land under this sky. So even nature, seagulls literally representing nature, can sense that this country, this land, this area is not a good place to stop. Okay, she's saying, the speaker is saying that the violence that is already happening, but that's only going to get worse, is recognized by even nature itself. This sky, in other words, the sky over South Africa at the time, specifically this sky, our present conditions that we find ourselves in. This again, shroud falling, something that covers or conceals who is not frightened. Okay, a shroud is a cloth used to cover dead bodies, usually in preparation for a funeral. So the word there is intensifying the feelings of fear, of anger, of helplessness in the face of the weather conditions, although we know it's not really actually about weather as such. The rain is the violence that is going to follow, and the cold. And shroud has connotations of death. So a lot of people are going to probably die during this period. And so then she uses the anaphora again, which is a line or phrase that is repeated throughout a poem. You must know that. The anaphora of who is not frightened. Okay, again, obviously, everybody is frightened. Okay, and it says there, in every part of the city. So it's not just certain areas of South Africa or of the cities that are being affected here. It's the whole country that's being affected. So in this stanza, the speaker's moving from observing nature to more of an analysis of the social texture of the city. Right. So she goes on to say, sad woman climbing onto buses, dogs barking in the street, and the children every doorway crying. Okay, so we get a very somber sort of tone here. We get sad woman. Why are they sad? Well, they're domestic workers. They're returning home at the end of the day after working in the white people's suburbs, cleaning the houses, and they're sad because now they're going to have to go back to their poor living conditions in the township. All right. And so it's in the afternoon, probably they're getting onto the buses. The dogs barking in the street, that just adds to the chaos and the noise and the disruption and the unrest of the world that these people are living in at the time. All right. I guess it goes in with the seagulls will not land under the skies, and nature also kind of feeling the oppression and the impending violence as well. And then we've got the children who are representative of innocence in every doorway crying. Why are they crying? Well, it's terrible to see a child cry. They're crying because they're hungry. They're crying because they don't have anything to do. They're living in such terrible conditions. They maybe don't have access to any education. Okay, so they are unhappy. The world is so hungry, right? Literally and figuratively. So yes, literally they are hungry because they're suffering from poverty. Okay, so they don't have food. All right, but they are also hungry for independence, hungry for equality. Their world, they don't have any rights. Okay, so remember, this is like from the viewpoint of the speaker. She's witnessing all of this and she can see it, and she's saying, my God, this world is so hungry. Madam's house is clean, right? So in the white suburbs, madam, which is what the domestic worker would refer to as their employee, okay, her house is clean. Okay, nice, because the domestic worker has been there. But it's ironic because she is going to a house that probably isn't clean. She doesn't have time to clean her own house, and the lack of funding and the conditions in which she finds herself means that it's not possible to live in a clean house. Okay, so these women climbing off of the buses, they're returning home with slow steps to the children, the street, the sky tolling like a black bell. Okay, so they're returning home with slow steps. We've got repetition of the S sound here. We've got a little alliteration going here. Why are the steps slow? Well, because they're tired from working, they're exhausted from the day, and also, you know, they're coming home to these terrible living conditions and there's nothing to look forward to. I mean, why is there a reason to be excited to be coming home? And they're coming home to the children, and, you know, why are you going to be happy when your children are busy standing there in the doorway crying? Coming home to the street, nothing special about the street, people just lounging about, idleness, the lack of purpose, you know, the sky tolling like a black bell, the sky, the atmosphere, the life in which they're living, the conditions of South Africa at the time. And we look at the word tolling there. So we've got a simile here. So the sky is not only black, but it's also tolling. Tolling is a bell run at funerals to announce the death of somebody. So that's suggesting that there's going to be a lot of death in the near future, and there probably has been a lot of death already. All right. We've got a metaphor here. These women are tired of sadness. All right. Which is also hyperbolic as well, because it's like their sadness has been compared to a whole tide. All right. So the extent of their sadness is so great that it can be compared to a sea, which we saw in stanza 2. So their tiredness is going to like drown anything in its path. It emphasizes how tired they are, and the sadness that they have. The sadness is like a tide coming in. It's so high, it's going to drown their world and everyone else, you know. So the extended metaphor of a sea that is swollen and dangerous, like we saw in stanza 2. And it's danger that's arising not from anger, but one of sadness, all right? Sadness for the way that they have to live. They feel helpless. They feel like they can't do anything. The sadness is overwhelming. There's nothing they can do to change the situation, you know. It's going to drown people. It's going to kill people, right? Who is not frightened? There again, everyone is frightened. On every corner, men standing, old stumps in the rain, tombstones engraved with open eyes, watching the bright cars full of sated faces, more than satisfied, past them, who is not frightened. Okay, if we look at the stanza, so on every corner of every street, there are men standing there, okay, and they are standing there because they're looking for jobs, and they're waiting for somebody to come along and offer them work for the day. But it's already probably the afternoon, and so they know that no one's coming, you know. And old stumps in the rain, tombstones. So we've got two metaphors kind of going there, comparing the men to tree stumps, which are compared then to tombstones. Okay, so they are basically on the edge of death. They may as well be dead. All right, they're more dead than alive because they're hungry. They don't have any jobs. What are they going to do? You know what I mean? Some of them are going to die of starvation. Right, engraved with open eyes, watching the bright cars. So they are able to see with open eyes. They're witnessing the reality of their situation in front of them, right? And you think of the sadness of the woman. So now we're talking about the men who cannot get jobs, right? They're stuck, right? They're not moving, unlike the woman's sadness, which said was moving like a tide. All right. So we continuing with this idea of social breakdown, the despair, the dehumanization of the men. There's that social divide in which the lives of the privileged few is put alongside the deprivation of the masses. Okay, so as these men are standing on the street, they're seeing these nice fancy cars being driven by the white people, full of sated faces, in other words, well-fed, or they've actually had more than enough food, unlike the non-white people, unlike the people standing on the edges of the corners of the streets who are starving. All right, they're watching them go by, past them. Cars just keep going, past. Nobody stops. Nobody offers them jobs. Okay, the people driving the cars, they don't care about the guys standing on the side of the road. Okay, and that repetition there of pass them, just means one car after the next, just going past them. It's just relentless. It emphasizes how terrible the situation is for these practically half-dead men and their families, how invisible they've become to the people that pass them every day. And also it reflects guilt and refusal to confront the reality of the social inequality. The sense of urgency conveyed in the repetition is ironic. One may pass them, but one is able to actually escape the all-pervading sense of fear there. And then, of course, who is not frightened, right? We get to the last stanza of the poem. Into the rain. Okay, so into the rain the children are running, thin as the barest twigs they kindle a fire to fight the winter. Right, so here we've got children literally running into the rain. Okay, so maybe like it is raining. Okay, and children don't care if it's like raining, they'll go play outside, they don't care. But they are also running, which means they're free. They're maybe oblivious to the fact of what is happening. They don't have the understanding of why they have to live the way they live. They don't understand the oppression. They don't understand the regulations and the restrictions of apartheid. Right. So the children are representative of innocence there. Thin as the barest twigs. So the children are being compared to twigs there. So we've got a simile. So the children, the way they react to what is happening around them is very different to how the adults are reacting, who are very fearful, right? But also they're running into this rain. In other words, they're entering this battle, this storm that is approaching. They're entering into this struggle, okay? This oppression of apartheid. So they are not spared from the violence that is about to take place and is in fact already taking place. The children are extremely thin, obviously, because they're being compared to twigs. So that's emphasizing the poverty, of course. And then they use a fire to warm themselves because they are so thin, right? The bare bodies, they can't afford sufficient clothing, right? A raging fire of dead children. A raging fire. So this seems to be referring to the children who have died in violent uprisings before this, like the Sharpeville massacre in Soweto, etc. Raging, that word, raging suggests the passion of the children and the ugliness of the system that's oppressing them. Children died when they were trying to bring about change during the apartheid era. Remember that poem, Child Who Was Shot Dead? You might remember that. And the sky, there's that sky again, the conditions, the world in which they're finding themselves, that oppression collapsing under centuries of rain. Okay, centuries emphasizes their pain and the suffering that they've had to endure for so long. All right, so the sky being symbolic of their oppression is now falling. The people are sensing that their oppression is going to maybe end soon. Okay, and the system of apartheid has become unbearable. It's been operating for a very long time in South Africa. There's a time for change. The time has arrived. But things are going to get worse before they get better. Remember, we've only just entered, as we saw in the first stanza. The wind like a mountain crying. Okay, the wind like a mountain crying. Okay, cries of anguish. We've got another simile there. Imagine the wind carrying all the oppression, all the sadness, all the mourning, all the suffering. who is not frightened of this winter? Because remember, we've got to try and link in the wind there. We're linking in with the literal sort of interpretation of this being a winter, okay, of this being a weather thing, with rain and wind and the sea being rough and all that, cold and all that, okay, right? And people are literally crying because they're so desperate, and they're just so desperate for change in their lives. Who is not frightened? There's the anaphora again of this winter coming upon us now, okay? The single repeated line ending each stanza becomes 2 lines here, with the addition of the idea that this winter is on the verge of arriving. It is imminent. It's terrifying. Everyone is terrifying. And, you know, it's coming. It's going to happen upon us. Means everyone, even those in the bright cars. No one is spared of the violence that's about to happen. And it's sort of like a warning of what lies ahead. And so we look at the structure of the poem. We've got free verse, we've got enjambment, which links to, you know, the lines running from one line to the next, sentences representing the rapidly approaching storm that's coming along. And then we look at, okay, well, what is the theme? What is the main message of the poem? Well, it's a storm of protest against apartheid. It's growing more and more. Violence is becoming more and more, but it's only going to get worse. It's inevitable, cannot be stopped. What is the message that the speaker is trying to get across? The unequal and the destructive effects of apartheid. And although it's not ended and it's going to get worse, it will end soon, because this winter it's going to happen. Okay? Time for change is now, right? The mood, how do we feel as the reader? That there's a sense of fear. We're picking up on the sadness of the woman, the despair of the men standing on the corners without jobs, half dead. We've got the rage of the children as well, crying in the doorways. But we've also got the sort of innocence of the children as well, because they are oblivious to what is actually happening around them, okay? But they are suffering. We know they're suffering because they're thin like twigs, all right? They've got bare bodies. They don't have clothing, all right? They're probably cold. And what is the tone? Well, there's a sense of fear, you know. The speaker has witnessed all of this, or is in the process of witnessing it, and she's like taking a step back, and she's like, wow, you know, I'm really worried about the storm that is coming, you know, and I can tell that it's coming, you know. The anaphora of who is not frightened really threads a sense of impending disaster. Yes, everyone is frightened, and they have every right to be.